Part 5. Shit Gets Crazy. At around the same time, René Descartes was going out of his head with skepticism. During his life, from 1596 to 1650, he doubted everything as a principle, and eventually arrived at the point of doubting his own existence, which was proven via the existence of the question. To ask a question, the questioner must exist. I think, therefore I am. Thomas Hobbes from 1588 to 1679 contributed to science and social philosophy. John Locke from 1632 to 1704 was a social and education philosopher as well, asserting the concept of the social contract, and most importantly for our focus here, maintaining that we're born tabula rasa, and that it's experience and sense perception that lead us to knowledge. From 1712 to 1788, Jean-Jacques Rousseau furthered the idea of the social contract, and also argued that education is a development of character, rather than an amalgamation of knowledge. There were many who helped bring about the age of reason in philosophy, and even in regards to education specifically. These people are just a sample. These thinkers argued that thinking was worthwhile, that evidence trumped authority, and that humans, despite all the discoveries that have removed us from the center, are still important. Part 6. Shit Gets Real Crazy. Using the scientific understandings of liquid, steam, and gas, the first steam engine was developed in 1712. It was called the Newcomen steam engine. We now had the power to move mountains. Everything is now ours for consumption, and holy shit are we good at that. We are creatures with a constant obsession for new sensory information. New sweets, new clothes, new rides, new anything. We're also creatures who die, and know it. We prepare security for the future, and so even when we're not consuming, we take and take, ravaging everything. Where the previous revolutions have set fire to our minds, the Industrial Revolution set fire to our world. It also brought prosperity to some, and not just the capitalist slavers. The Dickens-style depiction of the Industrial Revolution is famous. Slave labor, dirty streets, terrible crime, and the list goes on and on. Yet the cities swelled and swelled. The country townships dissipated. Why? Because nobody wanted to return to a life of scratching food from the earth and wondering if you would grow enough to not starve this winter. People rushed to the cities en masse and staffed the factories and labored through terrible days because it gave them food, shelter, and neighbors. This swelling of the cities produced a lot of problems. Despite the evidence that people stayed in cities voluntarily, Dickens can't be called false in his assessment of the period. There were serious problems. The urban migration of the Industrial Revolution brought with it complex problems such that humans have never faced before. Even simple things like eating and shitting were permissible only through major feats of system engineering. While parents worked all hours to keep the machines running, their children ran the streets in packs, becoming criminals even before becoming adults. People were brought into close social interaction like never before, and all versions of vice and villainy had their saints and vendors. Yet this amalgamation of minds also permitted great humanitarian and scientific advances, some of which are only now starting to shake the earth. Our individual villainies and our collective negligence in the treatment of the systems on which we depend can't be blamed on the Industrial Revolution alone. Through Martin Luther's theses and the Protestant Reformation we gained the right to think, a sacred right that will never again be removed. The Star Watchers of the Scientific Revolution gave us independence from judgment and fear, but also from protection, guidance, and with the burden of self-accountability. The thinkers of the Age of Reason showed us that we must care about and love each other, and that we alone are responsible for what we know. The Industrial Revolution put us together and gave us unnatural stress which our bodies and senses weren't evolved to cope with. All of this combined allowed us to run willy-nilly in our pillaging and human-on-human crime. There is no normal behavior that can be defined without extreme cultural personal bias. This means there's no natural good or evil. Of course, these revolutions combined had yet more profound and far-reaching positive outcomes, the evidence of which can be found in just about everything you've touched today. These revolutions, particularly the problems caused, but also the mind-boggling abundance of cool shit we were now learning, also encouraged the need for more public instruction and highlighted the importance of the ongoing conversation about didactic literature. Part 8. Spreading Stolen Fire. Amusing tales of instruction, as we've already seen, go back as far as writing itself. By the 1300s, however, courtesy books teaching how to navigate social situations had become especially popular. Though their popularity waned through the 1500s, there were a wide variety of other text types that had since been enabled by the printing press. Among these were the popular penny rags that could be bought for just a few pence. Penny rag is a term I'm applying to a variety of texts. The derogatory expression penny dreadful would not actually come into use for another 300 years or so. Anyhow, these penny rags would be bought by children and adults and passed around or read aloud to groups. Though dim in significance next to the key shapers of literature's path, these cheap 1, 2, and 6-penny books supplied a great deal of learning to many people. The subtler of these penny rags included broadsides, which were large single pages. These could be pressed with prayers, news, stories, songs, propaganda, or anything else. Some broadsides were all of these at once. One particular trend in broadsides was to report on unfortunate deformities in newborn babies. These would come with graphic illustrations of the deformed child, graphic descriptions, prayers to God, and best of all, an item-by-item blazon showing how the mutated child is a symbol of our corrupt age and poor behavior. Another popular and cheap type of text was the chapbook. Like the penny rags, this is a broad category with a posthumously applied name. They didn't call them chapbooks at the time. They called them books. Chapbooks were pocket-sized books, usually with quite poor production quality. They could be condensed versions of larger works, collections of fables or nursery rhymes, poetry collections. Their content wasn't universal, but they were a much distributed and traded medium, and they inspired people. They set minds alight. Part 9. Wielding the Flame. The beginnings of globalization saw the public with a burning interest in distant places. Many accomplished and acclaimed writers exploited this and developed a new genre of fiction made to resemble travel journals. Perhaps the most important work that fits this category, one of, if not the first of its kind, is Utopia by Thomas More in 1516. This novel goes to great lengths to prove its own veracity, presenting itself as a travel journal. It contains a lengthy, non-conclusive analysis of social structure and Commonwealth issues. Other fictional works pretending to be authentic emerged through this period, including the epistolary saga of Pamela, which teaches faith, hope, and perseverance, as well as cautioning against dangers of the world. A well-known later work that fits this faux journal category is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley in 1823, which is a many times nested epistolary and travel journal narrative. As we get closer to modern times, the term didactic rarely needs to be used. For example, the novels of George Orwell or H.G. Wells could easily be called didactic, but generally they're just called fucking good books. Still, the concept of didacticism remains important, largely because of some key questions that, despite 2,000 years of contemplation, are not fully resolved. Part 10. The Questions. I would like to go on and investigate important questions related to the state of didactic literature today, but since today happens to be today, I'll leave the questions hanging. To what degree should art, such as novels, films, and video games, be obligated to teach morals, subjects, or critical thinking? To what degree should education programs and materials be obligated to use art and fantasy in teaching methods? And what sort of topics should be considered for intentionally didactic works such as novels, films, and video games? And this was my presentation. Thank you for watching.